On a cold December night in 2003, Dr. Sarah Mitchell was about to perform the most shocking surgery of her career. The patient on her operating table wasn't just any John Doe. He was someone who would change everything she believed about a case that haunted her for 5 years. December 14th, 2003, Cleveland General Hospital, 11:47 p.m. The emergency room doors burst open as paramedics rushed in with a critically injured man. No identification, no wallet, no one to claim him, just another John Doe fighting for his life after a brutal car accident on Interstate 90. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the head of trauma surgery, was called in immediately. She had performed thousands of surgeries in her 15-year career, but this one would reveal a secret that had been buried for 5 long years. The patient was in critical condition, multiple internal injuries, severe head trauma, and massive blood loss. The paramedics found him trapped in a mangled sedan that had rolled multiple times down an embankment near the Hopkins International Airport exit. The car was so damaged that rescue teams needed 3 hours just to extract him from the twisted metal. Blood covered everything: the seats, the dashboard, even the ceiling of the vehicle. First responders were amazed he was still breathing when they finally pulled him free. Male, approximately 35 to 40 years old, Nurse Jennifer Chen reported as they wheeled him into OR 7. No identification found at the scene. Police are running the plates now, but the VIN number appears to have been deliberately removed. She paused, checking her notes. There's something else, Doctor. The paramedics found multiple fake IDs scattered around the crash site. Different names, different states, but all with this man's photo. Dr. Mitchell felt a chill run down her spine. In her 15 years at Cleveland General, she had seen her share of mysterious patients. Drug dealers without identification, criminals trying to avoid police attention, even witness protection cases. But multiple fake identities? That was something else entirely. She scrubbed in methodically, her mind already racing through possibilities. Who was this man? What was he running from? And why did he have so many different identities? The OR prep team worked with practiced efficiency. The anesthesiologist, Dr. Robert Park, was already concerned. His vitals are all over the place, he warned. Blood pressure dropping fast. We need to move quickly. The surgical nurses laid out instruments with precise movements, each one understanding that time was their enemy tonight. Outside OR 7, 2 police officers had already taken positions. Standard procedure for a John Doe, especially one found with multiple false identifications. As she began the initial examination, something caught her eye. A distinctive scar on the patient's left shoulder. Star-shaped, unusual, familiar. Dr. Mitchell's hands froze for just a moment. Her surgical assistant, Dr. James Rivera, noticed immediately. "Everything okay, doctor?" But Dr. Mitchell couldn't answer. That scar, she had seen it before. The shape, the size, even the slight discoloration around the edges. It was identical to one she remembered from 5 years ago. "Have we run his prints yet?" she asked, her voice slightly trembling. "Police are working on it, doctor. Should have results within the hour. They're also running facial recognition through missing persons databases." Nurse Chen responded, but she noticed the change in Dr. Mitchell's demeanor. In all their years working together, she had never seen the usually composed surgeon look so shaken. But Dr. Mitchell didn't need fingerprints. That scar, she had seen it before, 5 years ago, on a different patient, a patient who had vanished without a trace from this very hospital. The memory hit her like a physical blow. Robert Chen. The name came back instantly, along with all the questions his disappearance had left behind. November 1998, 5 years earlier. It had been a typical Ohio winter, gray and bitter cold. Robert Chen, a 32-year-old software engineer, had been admitted to Cleveland General with severe pneumonia. What should have been a routine treatment turned into one of the hospital's most baffling mysteries. The case had become something of a legend among the hospital staff, whispered about during quiet night shifts and discussed in hushed tones during break room conversations. Dr. Mitchell, then a junior attending physician fresh out of her residency at Johns Hopkins, had been assigned to his case. She remembered their first meeting vividly. Robert was charming, intelligent, but strangely evasive about his personal life. When she asked about family or friends to contact, he simply smiled and said he preferred to handle things alone. No visitors came during his entire stay. No phone calls, no get-well cards. Just a man who seemed to exist in complete isolation. "I prefer to keep to myself," he had told her with that mysterious smile she still remembered. "Less complicated that way. I've learned that connections can be dangerous." At the time, she had thought it was an odd choice of words. Now, looking at what might be his unconscious form on her operating table, those words took on an entirely different meaning. During his 2-week stay, Dr. Mitchell had noticed several unusual things about Robert Chen. First, he paid everything in cash, unusual for such expensive medical treatment. When the billing department questioned it, he produced rolls of $100 bills without hesitation. Second, he became visibly anxious whenever police or security passed his room. She had watched him tense up, his eyes tracking every uniform that walked by his door. Third, he had that distinctive star-shaped scar on his left shoulder. When she asked about it during a routine examination, he claimed it was from a childhood accident. "Fell out of a tree onto a broken fence," he had said, but his eyes had darted away when he said it, and despite being seriously ill with pneumonia that had filled his lungs with fluid, he constantly checked the windows and doors, always positioning himself where he could see both exits. Then, on the night of November 15th, 1998, Robert Chen vanished. The disappearance was discovered at 6:23 a.m. during morning rounds by nurse Patricia Williams, who was now retired in Florida. Robert's bed was empty, his IV pulled out with a disturbing precision that suggested medical knowledge, and the window was open despite the freezing temperatures outside. Security footage, grainy and unclear by today's standards, showed him leaving his room at 2:47 a.m. But then, nothing. He simply disappeared from all cameras after entering a blind spot near the emergency stairwell. The police investigation that followed revealed even more mysteries. The address Robert had provided, a nice suburban home in Shaker Heights, was fake. The house existed, but the family living there had never heard of Robert Chen. His insurance information led nowhere. The policy numbers didn't exist in any database. The name Robert Chen didn't match any records in Ohio or any surrounding states. His fingerprints, when run through AFIS, came back with no matches. Even his medical history, which he claimed included childhood asthma and an appendectomy, couldn't be verified anywhere. "It's like he was a ghost," Detective Mark Williams had said at the time. The phrase had stuck with everyone involved in the case. "This man doesn't exist on paper. No birth certificate, no social security number that checks out, no employment history we can verify. Either this is the best fake identity I've ever seen, or Robert Chen isn't who he claimed to be." The hospital conducted an internal investigation that lasted 3 months. How does a severely ill patient just vanish? The pneumonia had been serious. He was on strong antibiotics and needed oxygen support. Why would someone leave without completing critical treatment? And most importantly, who was Robert Chen really? The investigation found no evidence of staff involvement, no signs of foul play, and no explanation for how a man sick enough to require hospitalization could simply walk out and disappear into the cold November night. Back in the present, December 14th, 2003, OR 7, 12:24 a.m. As Dr. Mitchell worked to save John Doe's life, she couldn't shake the feeling. Every cut she made, every stitch she placed, her mind kept returning to that scar. The surgical team worked in focused silence, unaware of the storm of thoughts in their lead surgeon's mind. The patient's injuries were extensive: a ruptured spleen, internal bleeding in 3 locations, a punctured lung, and possible brain swelling that would need to be monitored carefully. "Get me the file on Robert Chen from November 1998, she instructed Nurse Chen between procedures. The entire OR went quiet for a moment. Everyone knew about the Chen case. It was part of hospital lore, but why bring it up now? "Doctor, shouldn't we focus on—" "Just get it. Please, have someone pull it from archives. I need to see it." Her tone brooked no argument. Dr. Rivera and the rest of the team exchanged glances but continued working. They had learned to trust Dr. Mitchell's instincts over the years. If she needed that file, there was a reason. As she repaired the internal bleeding, working with the precise movements that came from years of practice, her mind raced through possibilities. If this was Robert Chen, where had he been for 5 years? The math was simple, but the implications were staggering. He would be 37 now, which matched the age estimate. Why did he disappear that night? What had spooked him enough to flee a hospital while seriously ill? And what brought him back to Cleveland? Was it coincidence that he crashed so close to the hospital where he had vanished? The surgery was complex, requiring all her skill and concentration. 3 hours of intense work lay ahead. As she operated, more pieces of the puzzle emerged from the patient's body. Old surgical scars suggesting multiple identities and medical treatments under different names. There was evidence of a professionally removed tattoo on his right arm, the kind of laser removal that costs thousands of dollars and takes multiple sessions. She found evidence of previously broken bones that had healed years ago, a fractured rib, a broken finger, injuries consistent with someone who had lived a dangerous life. Most disturbing was a small, precise scar near his hip. When she investigated closer, she found a small microchip under the skin, unusual for 2003 when such technology was mostly limited to pets and experimental programs. She carefully removed it, placing it in a specimen container. Whatever this was, it might provide answers about their mysterious patient. At 3:31 a.m., Nurse Chen returned with the old file, dusty from 5 years in storage. Dr. Mitchell compared the medical notes while Dr. Rivera took over temporarily. She spread the papers on a side table, her gloved hands leaving small blood smears on the edges. Blood type: O negative. Match: rare allergies. Penicillin and shellfish. Match: previous surgical history. Appendectomy scar noted. Match: even small details aligned. A minor birthmark on the right hip. A slightly deviated septum noted during the original intake exam. But it was the X-rays that confirmed it beyond any doubt. An old fracture in the left metacarpal, healed in a distinctive pattern that was like a fingerprint. The break had been unusual, creating a slight S-curve in the bone that was visible even on the portable X-ray they had taken in the ER. This wasn't just similar to Robert Chen. This was Robert Chen. The mathematical probability of 2 different people having all these identical markers was essentially 0. Dr. Mitchell immediately notified hospital security and the police. The 2 officers outside OR 7 radioed for backup and a detective. Within 40 minutes, Detective Mark Williams, the same officer who had investigated the original disappearance, arrived at the hospital. He was older now, gray creeping into his hair, but his eyes were just as sharp as they had been 5 years ago. He had never forgotten the Chen case. It was the one that got away, the mystery that still bothered him on quiet nights. "You're certain it's him?" Detective Williams asked, studying the unconscious patient through the OR window. He held the old case file in his hands, comparing photos from 1998 to the man on the table. Despite the injuries and the passage of time, the resemblance was unmistakable. 99.9% certain. We're running DNA to confirm, but everything matches. Scars, old injuries, even dental work. Dr. Mitchell had finished the critical portions of the surgery and Dr. Rivera was closing. "Detective, there's something else. I found this." She showed him the small microchip in the specimen container. The detective's expression darkened. "Doctor, there's something you need to know. After Chen disappeared, we kept digging. The FBI got involved about 6 months later. We found connections to something much bigger than a simple missing person case." He pulled out a file marked "Classified, Law Enforcement Only." Robert Chen wasn't his real name. We believe he was connected to a series of high-tech corporate espionage cases throughout the late 90s. Several tech companies in Silicon Valley and here in Ohio reported stolen prototypes and classified information. Millions of dollars in intellectual property vanished. The FBI took over the case in 1999 when they found international connections. Dr. Mitchell felt a chill despite the warm OR environment. "Are you saying he was a spy?" The word felt surreal in her mouth. She was a doctor, not someone who dealt with international espionage. "We're saying he was something. Industrial espionage, foreign intelligence, organized crime. The FBI had theories but no solid proof. And now he's back. The question is why?" Detective Williams looked at the microchip again. "This changes everything. I need to contact the FBI immediately." As if on cue, the heart monitor began beeping rapidly. The patient was waking up despite the anesthesia. Dr. Park looked concerned. "This shouldn't be happening. He's had enough sedation to keep him under for another 2 hours at least." But the man's eyes were fluttering, fighting against the drugs in his system. The man's eyes opened fully. Confusion clouded them first, then recognition as he saw Dr. Mitchell, then fear. Pure, undiluted fear that made him try to sit up despite his injuries. "Dr. Mitchell?" he whispered, his voice hoarse from the ventilator tube they had just removed. The fact that he recognized her after 5 years, despite her surgical mask and cap, sent another chill through the room. "Hello, Robert. Or should I call you by another name?" She kept her voice calm, professional, though her heart was racing. Tears formed in his eyes. I never wanted to come back here, but I had no choice." His voice was different now. The cheerful, evasive patient from 5 years ago was gone. This was a man who had seen too much, run too far, and was tired of running. Detective Williams leaned forward, badge visible. "Sir, you're under arrest for fraud, at minimum. But first, we need to know who you really are." The patient closed his eyes, seeming to make a decision that had been 5 years in the making. When he opened them again, resignation had replaced fear. "My name is Michael Harrison, former NSA analyst. I've been in witness protection for 5 years. He laughed bitterly. "Well, I was supposed to be in witness protection. It didn't quite work out that way." "Witness protection?" Dr. Mitchell gasped. "But you disappeared from—" "I know how it looks. But that night, November 15th, 1998, I received a coded message hidden in what looked like a get well card. My cover was blown. The people I testified against had found me. I had to run. The U.S. Marshals were supposed to extract me, but they were 12 hours too late. By then, I knew assassins were already in Cleveland looking for me. Detective Williams was already on his radio calling for FBI backup. This had just become a federal case that was way above his pay grade. Within minutes, the hospital would be swarming with federal agents. But for now, it was just them in the recovery room, listening to a story that sounded like it came from a movie. Michael continued, his voice stronger now, as if finally telling the truth was giving him strength. "I've been living under 12 different names. moving every few months. James Patterson in Seattle, David Kim in Los Angeles, Roberto Silva in Miami, never staying long enough to make friends, never relaxing enough to feel safe. But 3 days ago, they found me again in Detroit. I was working at a small tech repair shop, keeping my head down. Then I saw a face I recognized from the old days, one of their enforcers. The car accident. It wasn't an accident. He gestured weakly to his injuries. They ran me off the road. Professional job. Made it look like I lost control on black ice, but I've been running for 5 years. I know how to spot a hit. I managed to avoid the worst of it, but he coughed, blood speckling his lips. I guess I didn't avoid enough. Within 2 hours, the hospital was indeed swarming with federal agents, FBI, U.S. Marshals, even some men in suits who didn't identify their agency. Michael Harrison, formerly Robert Chen, was placed under 24-hour guard by a rotating team of federal agents. The hospital floor was locked down, with every visitor being checked and double-checked. The truth that emerged over the next several days was more complex than anyone imagined. Michael had been a brilliant NSA analyst working on cybersecurity in the mid-1990s, when the Internet was just becoming crucial to national security. He had discovered a massive corporate espionage ring that was selling secrets to foreign governments, not just corporate secrets, but classified government contracts, Defense Department specifications, even early cyber warfare tools. His testimony in a closed federal court had led to dozens of arrests in 1997, taking down a network that spanned from Silicon Valley to Washington, D.C. to Moscow. But the syndicate was larger than anyone realized. They had connections everywhere, in law enforcement, in government, even in the witness protection program itself. Someone had leaked his location in Cleveland, where he was supposed to be safe as Robert Chen, a quiet software engineer recovering from pneumonia. "Why come back to Cleveland?" Agent Sarah Foster asked during the bedside interrogation. She was FBI counterintelligence, flown in specifically for this case. "You had to know it was dangerous." Michael's answer shocked everyone in the room. "Because I'm dying. Not from the accident. Cancer. Stage 4 pancreatic. I have maybe 6 months, probably less. I wanted to die somewhere familiar, somewhere I had felt safe, even briefly." He looked at Dr. Mitchell. "You were kind to me. In 5 years of running, yours was one of the few genuine smiles I encountered. I remembered this hospital, the view from my old room, the way the morning light came through the windows. When you're dying, you want to be somewhere that feels human." But the story wasn't over. As the FBI dug deeper into the wrecked car, they discovered why Michael had really returned to Cleveland. Hidden in a specially constructed compartment in the trunk, they found a hard drive containing 5 years of evidence he'd been collecting. While running for his life, he had also been investigating, tracking the remnants of the espionage ring that had destroyed his life. The data was staggering. Names, dates, transactions, photos, recorded conversations. Proof that the espionage ring was not only still active, but had evolved and infiltrated major government contractors working on classified projects. Defense contractors, aerospace companies, tech firms with government contracts. The network had spread like a cancer through the military-industrial complex. He wasn't just running. Agent Foster explained to Dr. Mitchell during a break in the investigation. He was investigating, building a case. Every city he fled to, he gathered more evidence. Every fake identity he used was another way to get close to suspects. He knew he was dying and wanted to finish what he started 5 years ago. The accident had been an assassination attempt, but it had failed in its primary objective. Michael had survived long enough to ensure the evidence reached the right hands. The microchip Dr. Mitchell had found? It contained encryption keys for the hidden files, a dead man's switch that would have released everything to major news outlets if he hadn't survived the surgery. 3 weeks later, Dr. Mitchell visited Michael in his hospital room. He was recovering from surgery but receiving treatment for his terminal cancer. The federal agents were still there, but they had relaxed enough to allow visitors. The room was different from the one he had fled 5 years ago, but the view was similar, looking out over the Cleveland skyline, now covered in winter snow. The transformation in Michael was remarkable. The haunted, paranoid man who had lived in shadows for 5 years was slowly emerging into someone who could smile without looking over his shoulder. He had even started joking with the nurses, something the old Robert Chen would never have done. The federal protection meant he could finally relax, knowing that for once, someone else was watching his back. "Why didn't you just stay in witness protection?" she asked. "After that first leak, they could have moved you overseas, given you a completely new life." Michael smiled sadly, adjusting his hospital gown with thin fingers that showed the toll cancer had taken. "You can't live your whole life in fear. I had unfinished business. People needed to be stopped. And honestly, doctor, I was tired of running. Do you know what it's like to never use your real name? To never tell anyone your real story? To look over your shoulder every moment of every day? After the diagnosis, I decided I'd rather die as Michael Harrison than live another day as a ghost." He paused, looking out at the snow falling gently on the city. "You know what I missed most? Simple things. Using my real signature, telling someone a story from my actual childhood, calling my mother on her birthday. For 5 years, I couldn't do any of that. Every conversation was a lie. Every relationship built on deception. Even when I wanted to be honest, I couldn't be. That kind of isolation, it eats at your soul." Dr. Mitchell understood better now. The cheerful but evasive patient from 1998 had been a man drowning in loneliness, unable to reach out for fear of death. "That must have been incredibly difficult," she said softly. "The worst part was the holidays," Michael continued. "Christmas, Thanksgiving, 4th of July. Watching families celebrate together while I sat in whatever dingy apartment I was hiding in that month. I'd order Chinese takeout and pretend it didn't matter. But it did. God, it did." His voice cracked slightly. "Last Christmas, I was in Detroit, working at that repair shop. The owner invited me to his family dinner. I had to decline, make up some excuse about visiting relatives. He was so kind, and all I could give him in return was lies." He gestured to a stack of newspapers on his bedside table. The FBI raids were front-page news across the nation. Using Michael's evidence, they had dismantled the entire espionage network. 47 arrests across 12 states. Congressional hearings were being scheduled. Hundreds of millions in stolen secrets recovered. Several major defense contracts were being reviewed. It was the largest counterintelligence operation in decades. "You saved lives," Dr. Mitchell told him. "Those defense secrets that were being sold. Who knows what could have happened if enemy nations had gotten that technology?" "Maybe," Michael said quietly. "Or maybe I just finally finished what I started. Either way, I can rest now. For the first time in 5 years, I can close my eyes without wondering if I'll wake up. Do you have any idea what that means? To sleep peacefully?" Their conversations became a regular part of Dr. Mitchell's rounds. She would spend her lunch breaks in his room, and they talked about everything. He told her about his real life before everything went wrong. Growing up in Oregon, studying computer science at MIT, his pride at being recruited by the NSA. He had wanted to serve his country, to use his skills for something meaningful. The irony that his patriotism had led to 5 years of being hunted by the very country he'd tried to protect wasn't lost on either of them. "I had a girlfriend once," he admitted one afternoon. "Sarah. We met at MIT. I was going to propose before everything happened. The handlers told me I could never contact her again, for her safety and mine. I've wondered 1,000 times what she thought when I just disappeared. Did she think I abandoned her? Did she hate me? Did she move on?" He smiled sadly. "I hope she moved on. I hope she found someone who could give her a real life, not the shadow existence I've been living." Michael Harrison died on June 15, 2004, at 3:47 p.m. on a sunny Tuesday afternoon. The cancer had progressed rapidly in his final weeks, but he faced it with a peace that moved everyone who knew him. Dr. Mitchell was with him, holding his hand as he passed. His last words were, "Thank you for remembering me." He died not as John Doe or Robert Chen or any of his dozen other identities, but as himself, a man who had sacrificed everything to expose the truth and who, in his final months, had found a measure of peace. The days before his death had been filled with unexpected connections. His mother, Helen Harrison, had flown in from Oregon despite her age and frailty. Their reunion was heartbreaking and beautiful. 5 years of stored conversations pouring out in the limited time they had left. She brought photo albums, and they spent hours going through them, Michael finally able to reclaim his past. "This is you at your 8th birthday," she would say, pointing to a gap-toothed boy grinning at the camera. "You insisted on a dinosaur cake. I had to drive to 3 different bakeries to find one." The FBI had also arranged something extraordinary. Using secure video links, they connected Michael with other protected witnesses he had helped save through his evidence. A woman in Seattle whose husband had been murdered by the syndicate thanked him through tears. A former defense contractor in Virginia who had refused to participate in the espionage told Michael that his testimony had given him the courage to come forward. "You showed us it was possible to do the right thing," the man said, "even when it costs everything." His funeral was attended by an unusual mix of people: FBI agents, U.S. Marshals, hospital staff, and his mother. It was a strange gathering. Most funerals don't have federal agents providing security and sweeping for surveillance devices, but it was fitting for a man who had lived such an unusual life. He was buried in a small cemetery outside Portland, under his real name, with a headstone that simply read, "Michael Harrison, 1966-2004. He chose truth over safety." Agent Foster gave a eulogy that would later be classified, speaking carefully about Michael's contributions without revealing operational details. Michael Harrison understood that sometimes one person standing up to corruption can change everything. He paid a price none of us should have to pay, but his courage saved lives and protected our nation's secrets. In a world of comfortable compromises, he chose the difficult path of truth. Dr. Mitchell also spoke, her words more personal. "I knew Michael by another name first, as a patient who vanished into the night. When he returned, I discovered not just his true identity, but his true character. In his final months, despite everything he had endured, he showed more grace, humor, and humanity than most of us manage in a lifetime. He taught me that healing isn't just about the body. It's about finally being able to tell your story, to be known for who you really are." His mother's words were the most powerful. "My son was many things: brilliant, stubborn, brave to the point of foolishness. But above all, he was honest. Even when that honesty meant giving up everything, he couldn't live with lies. I lost him for 5 years, but I'm grateful I got to see him one last time, to tell him I was proud of him. Not many mothers get that chance." The ripple effects of Michael's evidence continued long after his death. The trials went on for 3 years, with some cases still being litigated a decade later. Classified technology that had been sold to foreign powers was recovered or neutralized. Several hostile nations' intelligence operations were set back by decades. A congressional commission was formed to investigate how the witness protection program had been compromised, leading to major reforms. All because one man chose to stop running and finish what he started, even though he knew it would likely cost him his life. Dr. Mitchell still works at Cleveland General, now as chief of surgery. She keeps a small framed photo in her office, not of Michael, which would be too dangerous even now, but of the view from his hospital room, the Cleveland skyline in winter snow. When young residents ask about it, she tells them it reminds her that every patient has a story worth hearing. The case changed how she practices medicine. She instituted new protocols at Cleveland General for handling vulnerable patients, working with federal authorities to create safe spaces for those who might be in danger. She regularly lectures at medical schools about the intersection of medicine and justice, always careful not to reveal classified details but sharing the broader lessons about compassion and courage. Once a year, on June 15th, she receives a card with no return address. Inside is always the same message. Thank you for remembering. H.H. Helen Harrison, Michael's mother, keeping a promise she made at her son's bedside to never let his sacrifice be forgotten. The star-shaped scar became a symbol for Dr. Mitchell, a reminder that truth can hide in plain sight, that the stories we tell to protect ourselves sometimes contain the deepest honesty. She learned that Michael had been telling the truth about falling from the tree, but the fence that caused the scar had been in the backyard of his childhood home, a place he could never return to once he entered protection. Even his lies had been anchored in truth, a desperate attempt to hold on to some piece of his real self. In 2010, when the FBI created the Michael Harrison Protocol, they consulted with Dr. Mitchell extensively. The protocol ensures that protected witnesses receiving medical care have access to secure facilities, pre-screened medical staff, and emergency extraction procedures. It also includes provisions for psychological support, recognizing the immense toll that isolation takes on those in protection. Michael's suffering led to policies that have saved dozens of lives. And in OR 7 at Cleveland General, the small plaque remains, noticed by few but meaningful to those who know the story. In memory of all patients who carry untold stories. SM. Every time Dr. Mitchell operates in that room, she remembers that healing sometimes means more than surgical precision. It means seeing the human being beneath the mystery. Sometimes late at night, when the hospital is quiet and she's walking past OR 7, she thinks about all the John Does who have passed through those doors. How many had stories they couldn't tell? How many were running from something or someone? How many needed not just medical care but the simple human recognition that they mattered, that someone would remember them? Michael Harrison's legacy lives on in ways both large and small, in congressional legislation protecting whistleblowers, in reformed witness protection protocols, in the families whose loved ones weren't killed by enemies using stolen defense secrets, but perhaps most importantly, in the reminder that one person's courage to tell the truth, even at tremendous personal cost, can echo through history and change countless lives. In a world that often rewards convenient lies over difficult truths, Michael Harrison stood as proof that integrity matters, that some things are worth more than personal safety, and that sometimes the most powerful act of rebellion is simply refusing to disappear completely. He may have lived as a ghost for 5 years, but he died as a man whose name will be remembered, whose story will be told, and whose sacrifice made the world a little bit safer for those who dare to tell the truth.